If you have a desire that you feel deep in your heart space, there is a big difference between your head and your ego and your mind and what that's telling you versus what your soul and your heart is telling you. I truly believe that the more you lean into your heart's calling, the more aligned your life will be. Usually, I will say this from my own experience, the heart's calling doesn't always make the most sense on paper, ever. But once you continue to listen to it and you take steps towards it, the universe starts to pull things into your path because you are stepping into alignment on the life you want to be living. It just makes all the sense in the world at the heart level. You will not live a life with regrets the more you lean into the heart. And it's possible. Everything is possible.
Welcome to And Then I Did This. Prepare to be inspired as we celebrate the unique journeys of individuals who've had the courage to break free and live life on their own terms. Their lives prove that you truly can be free to live your best and most authentic life. Let's get to it. Welcome to another episode. Today, I have a very special guest. Jessica Berg is the founder of Moonrock Wellness, where she helps female professionals connect back to themselves with online classes, including yoga, meditation, breathwork, sound healing, and one-on-one coaching. Jessica invested 2 decades of her life doing corporate work, which is where we originally met, before launching out on her own to found Moonrock Wellness. So Jessica, welcome to the show. I'm so excited for you to share your story. So you could start wherever you would like in your journey. It might be interesting to know like where you started, how you began your career, and then how you progressed and are now doing what you're doing.
No, absolutely. I'm so excited to be here. So thank you. Oh my gosh, where to start where do I start with 20 years? I mean, when I look back at where I started versus where I am today, I really do see that every role I had within my career kind of led me to exactly where I am right now. And it's funny because I was talking about this to someone, my husband, talking about this to someone else, my husband. We were talking the other day and I was just talking about, we are so kind of like trained to just check the box and, graduate high school, check, go to college, check, right out of college, just get a job. That's all you need. You just need a job that pays a salary. Right. And I remember even being talked out of pursuing a degree in art because that wasn't, and not by my parents, but more my uncles, that wouldn't pay the bills, So it's just like we're constantly trained of doing what is expected of us. Right. And even in the course of my 20 years, like even hitting burnout and everything, I didn't really step back and question why I was kind of putting myself through the long hours, the high fight or flight stress. And it wasn't until the last 5 years where I really started to just ask myself, there's got to be a different way to make a salary and also to experience life. Why does it, have to be one or the other? And that's kind of where I started my venture and what's brought me to the other side.
To the other side, making the leap. Yeah.
Making the leap.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So how did you start getting, I call it stacking skills, because we add on one thing after the other until we have this array of skills that we can offer the world and things that are way more in alignment with where our heart is at. Probably. So how did you start that while you were in your corporate roles? Because obviously I'm presuming you did some of that while you were still
absolutely
saddled up as an executive.
Oh God, absolutely. Yeah. Burning the candle at both ends for a little bit there. Yeah. But honestly, it all started with the work on myself. Like I hit some pretty bad burnout. It was before COVID happened. So I can't blame it on COVID by any means, but I had been burnt out before in the agency days where I feel like everyone who's been in an agency has 1 or 2 stories of burnout. And I thought I had put boundaries in place to to make sure that that wouldn't happen again. But I threw myself in it. I'm a type A hyperachiever. And what I know now is that I didn't do some of the deep inner healing work in order to maintain those boundaries, the people pleasing, the fear, the limiting beliefs, all that other stuff. But there was one time where, but my burnout really peaked, where I was working like 10, 12-hour days, weeks on end. And I wasn't really owning my calendar. I was letting the demands all come kind of piling on at me. I was taking on other people's work to try to compensate for where other people might not be showing up, et cetera. And I had 2 young kids. And I remember there was one night my son came up to me and I was at the dinner table, we had finished eating dinner, but I was still working. And he came up to me and was like, "Mommy, I drew you a picture." And it was this little picture, and I have it above my desk because it's a constant reminder for me to always, remember that moment because it was really pivotal. And it was a picture where it was 2 stick figures, obviously him and me, and he was holding an umbrella over me, and above there's lightning and a thunderstorm going. And he said, "I'm protecting you from being sad and from getting hurt." And because he was seeing the stress that it was taking on me, and he was seeing how unhappy I had become. And I remember taking that picture and I thanked him, and I walked up to my bedroom and I just collapsed on the floor and I just started bawling my eyes out because I'd gotten to a point where my whole life was work, and the buildup of the resentment was very strong in how I felt towards my work because I was seeing the amount of time that I wasn't present with my kids and my husband, myself. And it was in that moment where I started changing things drastically, and I started putting those boundaries in place, but I really started working on the inner child work. I started working, like, kind of asking what caused me to get to this point. And it's by reflecting inward and doing that healing work on myself that I started to build kind of the tools and the mindset and the strategy to put a balance in place between work and life. And that's where I was able to see you can have an excelling career and a personal life. You don't have to have one or the other, but you're the one who's dictating what that looks like. And that's what I wanted. I see so many women time and time again, and men too. I just have more, empathy being a female myself and a working mom. I just see time and time again where the same thing, we're just constantly prioritizing other people's needs before our own. We're losing connection for ourselves. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I talk to where they're like, "I just don't have time to even go for a walk." And it's like, oh my gosh. And then they get the walking treadmills to work under their desks because God forbid, they walk away from their desk. And it's just, so from that moment on, for my own healing, I started to kind of build the skill sets to create those boundaries and that balance. And then that's where I decided, this is what I want to do. I want to help other women live a more balanced life, have abundance, be present, and really connect back to themselves. And that's kind of where it was all born.
Which is so good. Good. It's making me remember when I was at the agency in New York, and my boss at the time had told me about the New York Open Center, and he said, "I think you would really like this place. You just check it out." And so I saw they had a coaching open house one night. It was like on a Friday night. And I remember I reserved to go. It was like a 2-hour open house. It was like an introductory experience it was coaching for transformation. And so I I remember running to the end of the block. I was in a sublet that summer. I think I had moved apartments for some reason and caught a cab, got there just as it was starting. I mean, working late on a Friday, like why? Why do that to myself?
Yeah.
And so I got there and they were doing an icebreaker, and I got paired with one of the founders of the program. And the question we were asking one another in the introductory icebreaker was, if you could do anything with your life and there were no barriers, what would you do and why?
Do you remember what you put?
I do. It was such a pivotal moment. I looked at him, and tears started rolling down my cheeks. And I said, how long do you continue doing something that's sedating your soul?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even answer. I couldn't even answer the question because I still use the analogy of, when you'll ask someone, are you on your path? It's like, I don't even know where the road is, let alone if I'm on my path. But I also pursued doing that, thinking I wanted to be a therapist when I was in college. And then I got steered away by friends who were like, oh, everybody's a psych major. So then I went a different route and ultimately I remember I was meant to become a certified coach. So that night, I remember staying there and calling, one of my daughters and, saying, oh my gosh, I just had the most amazing experience. And I just know I have to do this. I wasn't even sure how I was going to pay for it, but I'm like, I just have to do this. It was like a $6,000 program for 9 months. And, it was just one of those, I just knew I had to do it. So it was through working on myself though, also because I'd had a failed marriage, failed relationships. I was like, I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to figure this out. Like, I'm going to figure life out because I'm not going to go through that again. Right.
Yes.
And so as we do that, then we acquire the skills and then we heal ourselves and then see outside at how many wounded people, there's so many people who are carrying all of the things you just listed off, the people pleasing, like the fear of failure, wanting to achieve all of the, being accepted. And it just leads to us doing things at work and in our personal lives in a way that we burn ourselves out. So
100%. And it's so crazy to me, especially now looking back, when I was in the thick of it and I was just doing it. My things that I would say to myself is, well, this is the norm, which is horrible. And I even remember in the agency days, and this was before I had kids, but this is kind of where it all started to develop is I remember I wanted to be one of the first people in the office and the last people to leave because it was like a badge of honor. And I don't know why or where that mindset came from, but it was something that my ego proudly wore when I'm just sitting at my desk as long as possible, because that shows my commitment to this organization, but not a commitment to myself.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I actually wrote about that recently, being first in, last out, and how incentive programs are designed to get the achievers to even go above and beyond what they normally would have done, because there's all this recognition that's built into the ecosystem in the corporate environment. And that's how people get considered for raises. That's how people get considered for promotions. And in spite of us being burned out or burning the candle at both ends, I was a sandwich child, elderly parents, young children, and was a single mom. I was a solo mom doing it. I just remember being exhausted. There was no space. And I just kept going, but it was to a detriment at a certain point because you get disconnected from yourself, which is why I love Moonrock Wellness. The whole concept of that is reconnecting with ourselves as women. I think women tend to take on a lot. If you compare the roles, typically women take on a lot.
Yeah, we take the brunt personally, and 100%. And then even professionally, I feel that it was easier for me. And I'm also a type A hyperachiever. So there was a lot of perfectionism things that I had to work through because I started to realize, I was like, okay, if I want to have balance in my life, one, I have to have boundaries. So I have to work on this people pleasing, and I have to work on me being okay with saying no, even to clients, even to my boss, right? Because I'm committing to myself on my balance and my wellness. And then there's the whole entire, the need to address perfectionism. That was another thing that was a big thing for me. Mm-hmm. So that was stopping me from truly being able to delegate any of the work, or also being the catch-all for any leaky buckets. So when people weren't performing, I was kind of overcompensating for their lack. And that's just, it's a recipe for complete burnout. And like you said, just absolute disconnect from who you are and disconnect from your body too. That's where I feel the whole entire everything starts, is our presence with our body. And
absolutely,
you lose connection with that when we're just sitting at our desk, working, fight or flight stress, pumping cortisol pumping through us.
So let's shift to at the point you made the decision within yourself, whether it was, I will say we get whispers.
Yeah.
You need to do something different, and I was like, you need to do something different. It'll become a yell and a scream if we don't listen to the whisper. So that pivotal point, what was that? And what were the steps you started to take?
Oh, I love this question. So I would say that they started out as whispers, and it really felt as though it was, the only way I can describe it is it felt like whispers from the soul. It was a pull, like a soft little pull from the heart that just was like, there's something else out there. There has to be something else that I can be doing with my life. And it was very much centered around wanting to have a positive impact and having a life that felt more purpose-led versus ego-led. And like it starts with that one little whisper, and then you lean into it, and then you start getting curious. And it's like, well, what could this look like? And I remember I first started I was like, I'm going to write a book. That's what it is. And then I have my whole entire like outline of it. And while I still do want to write a book one day, it's definitely not what I ended up doing, but it was a stepping stone. And I think that it all starts with that curiosity and that pull from the heart. And then just starting to develop, like it over time, it does become more clear, and being open to the shape shifting. So when I got this vision of Moonrock, it was going to be a brick and mortar. It was going to be, I was going to have yoga and all this like healing and wellness. And then I was going to have like healthy food so that it could be like a community center and music and all this stuff. My husband, when I approached him with this, was having heart palpitations because here I am suggesting leaving my high paying corporate career and opening up a brick and mortar in Southern California, where the lease is just, we live by the beach. So you can only imagine what that lease amount is. But then obviously through some coaching that I had signed up for, I realized that online was definitely more my avenue. And then it just kind of started to morph. But there was a lot of steps that I had to take. Like I said, once I had the idea, and once I had the vision of what this business was going to be, and I knew it was almost like without question, it was, this has to happen. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make it happen. So I started waking up at 4 a.m. for 2 years so that I could work on Moonrock before my kids woke up and then before my corporate work, right? I would work weekends. And that's where I was kind of burning the candle at both ends, but I knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel. It wasn't something I was going to do forever. And then just the internal work, then the shadow work and the inner child work that I had to do to really start to peel back the layers of the systematic beliefs and mindsets that had been ingrained in my system from day one.
Right.
Like being okay with detaching myself from the ego and my identity with this career, and being okay with doing something that not everyone does. And that goes against the grain, but goes completely in line with my soul. Even the limiting beliefs, the being okay with the whole entire mindset of 40-hour work weeks. I mean, why is that the bar? And I would say the minimum that some of us strive for.
Right.
And starting to shift that mindset, right?
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of inner work that I had to go through. And I got a coach, and it completely helped guide me. It kept me accountable. And I just kept evolving internally. And then I got to the point where I was like, I'm ready.
Yeah, I hear all of that.
Yeah.
It's just the whole journey of that. It brought me back to at the point that I was in New York, and I had always said, I will never live in New York, and then wound up moving there twice for jobs, for agency roles. And I remember sitting on a park bench in overlooking the Hudson River. And I also had gone through the coaching program and had actually hired one of my peers to coach me. And I remember I was wanting to leave. I was wanting to get out of New York. And I said to her, but I don't think I can make this kind of money if I move back to the West Coast or if I leave here. And she just asked this one question and it shifted everything because I had tears rolling down my cheeks. And she said, is that the truth or is that a story you're telling yourself?
Yes.
And it stopped me, right? Literally, it was like a light bulb came on. I remember walking back to my apartment and I literally took the steps to reach out to people that I knew that were, and actually that's how we got connected at that point. Soon after that, because I moved to San Diego, and with less than a month, I was in a new role, moving to Southern California, out of the city, living somewhere where I'd always wanted to be. And it was all just a shift in perspective and what we give ourselves permission to do. Because I think one of the challenges we have when we get in, for anyone that's listening, in corporate roles where we're just in this hamster wheel, like got to keep it going, got to keep moving, don't look up, just do the next thing in front of you. You have to give yourself permission to step away. It's all about the questions you ask yourself. Mm-hmm. We can ask empowering questions or we can ask disempowering questions. So that is just a key to being able to recognize what else, to your point, like you knew there was something else you were meant to be doing other than the type of life that you had created up to that point. And especially with young children. I mean, it's
100%.
And that's a whole story in itself.
A whole nother thing. And I feel that when we fear is very much something that we tend to default to. I saw this quote, which stopped me in my tracks, where it was like fear and belief so fear in the unknown and belief in like the best possible outcome are both based off of unknown situations. Mm-hmm. But as humans, we are just trained to default to the fear of failure, the fear of not being accepted, the fear of whatever it might be, fill in the blank. But what if we started to put more energy into the possibility? Because we all are limitless, anything you put energy into and passion and belief into, it's going to grow. And it's a complete mindset shift to start, one, being mindful of the fear when it comes up, but then also to start asking yourself the question, what's the worst that can happen? Exactly. Because when you make a leap like this, it doesn't impact, in most cases, if you're married, if you have kids, it's not going to impact just you. And coming from a place in digital marketing, it brings us a good, significant salary, which is why the golden handcuffs are absolutely a legit thing.
Right.
So when you're on this path and you want to make the leap, there's other people that you are taking into consideration. And having my husband on board was obviously like a requirement.
Yes.
So the two of us, I'm more just anything can happen. Just believe in the positive.
Just do it.
Just do it. And he's more of but this could happen and that could happen. I like to say we balance each other out pretty well.
Right.
Like the balloon floating up in the air and he's the one like, come back down a little bit. But getting him to come on board. And I remember I was kind of prepping myself after a year and a half of me working towards this and getting to the point where I knew I couldn't do both for much longer. And I also knew that I wasn't going to be able to grow my business to where I wanted it to be by putting an hour and a half a day into it. Right. So I wanted to have a serious conversation with him and just really make sure that we were on the same page as far as like me taking the departure, because I was in strategic sales before I left. And there was a sales book that we had laying around the house. And the question the whole thing that this guy talks about is ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? And so that's what I kind of proposed to him. It's like, well, what's the worst that can happen? And also to myself, the worst that can happen, God forbid, it doesn't work out. And I have to figure out and circle back to where I started, right? Or to me, the worst that could happen was me regretting not taking the chance on myself.
Absolutely.
Like that's something, if I get lucky enough to live past 80, maybe 90, when I'm on my deathbed, that's something I would regret.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
That was my driving force, really.
Yeah. That's that quote from one of the coaching books that I read.
Really?
From Donna Markova saying, I will not die an unlived life.
I love that.
And we have to challenge ourselves because what you said at the very beginning, we are just conditioned from 0 to 7 and into high school. I remember telling my mom I wanted to travel once I graduated from high school. And I know she was in a more traditional role where she wanted to be a teacher. She wanted to go to school and then didn't get that opportunity. So she was not able to pursue anything professionally for herself. So she was committed that I was going to go to school. And then I just, remember graduating like, oh, I want to move to New York and work for an agency or a magazine. And her saying, oh, that's so far away. Are you sure? And then I got swayed and didn't do it. Ultimately, there I was like later in my late 40s, like early 50s going to New York and wound up doing that. So, whatever we're meant to do, I think our path will ultimately wind up getting there.
Finds us.
Yes, absolutely. I know that you have got to have, because you're fairly new into this. So I like hats off to you. You're a month, a little over a month and a half going on into your new venture. So what are the things that you're doing to keep yourself on track when doubts come up, when uncertainties come up? Any words of advice you would have for people to stay the course?
Yeah, I think and I was actually, it's funny you asked that because I was having this pep talk with myself this morning and it's a constant, right? I mean, when I decided I was ready to take the leap, that readiness was not from a financial standpoint for my business. My business wasn't nowhere near where I financially wanted it to be, but I had gotten it to as far as I could take it. So the readiness was emotionally and mentally like at my knee. And then now kind of being 6 weeks on the other side, I'm definitely the happiest I think I've been in decades, which is amazing.
Oh, so good.
I was thinking this morning because I was thinking about my numbers and all this other stuff. And I had to remind myself, like, you have to look at your progress in 6, 12, 18-month increments. Like you cannot look at your progress on a day-by-day level because that is going to, the growth is more of a long-term growth. The shifts are more long-term. And when you look at that, when I think about 6 months ago from where I am today, there's huge milestones and shifts that I've made and built and created. Even the numbers are, promising. And it's just to kind of remind yourself when you're in it and, like I said, I'm a type A hyperachiever. So I'm constantly like, reflecting and thinking of the things I could be doing better, or this, and this. And it's really just kind of reminding yourself to, relish in the present moment. So don't get so caught up on where you want to be versus where you are that you're not relishing in where you are, but also looking at your progress in large chunks of increments.
Yeah, absolutely.
That you don't get discouraged because it's a long game for everyone.
Absolutely. I know I just learned and was reminded to do is to reflect on what you did the day before. Did I work on my key goals? And to acknowledge yourself for the things that you did do, which I just had to do that for myself recently, just to remind myself and to keep in mind exactly what you said. All there ever is right now. Past is over. The future, I say, as long as we're moving in the right direction, slow motion's better than no motion.
Yeah.
And as long as you're in the right direction, you'll eventually get there, and to relish it along the way, because it's not any kind of, oh, I've arrived. We're always evolving and growing and continuing, and just remembering. Did that recently myself. I wrote down, okay, these are all the things that I just have completed in the last, whatever the window of time was. And it fuels you to keep going. And the other thing that you were saying triggered also for me was like, a why. Why am I doing this? And remembering why I'm doing it
Yep.
will, if I'm tired, it'll give me that little oomph to finish whatever that thing is if I want to get it done. Right.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
100%. And something else I'm very acutely aware of, especially because I'm, like we were saying, I'm a month and a half on the other side of corporate.
mm-hmm.
Corporate is very much heavy masculine energy, where it's very go, go, go. It's very action oriented. As a result, at least from my experience and the roles I play, like there is a lot of pressure. There is a lot of high stress. And so you're trying to pack a ton of stuff in a little amount of time. There's never enough time in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And being on the other side of it, what I have realized is these are habits and my ways of working that I really need to freaking tear down and break apart,
Mm-hmm.
because that stress and that feeling like time is scarce,
Yes,
that will carry over into this new world that you've been dreaming for if you don't allow yourself to slow down and respect these new boundaries, because you are your own boss. I was looking at my schedule the first 2 or 3 weeks into it. I was like, God, holy crap, I'm working 10-hour days. And I didn't really pick up on it because I was so excited that all my energy and time could actually go into my passion.
Right.
But I soon realized that I was like, this is not what I want. And guess what? I'm my own boss. So I should be able to
Absolutely.
But it's being mindful of those habits.
Yes,
you might have.
absolutely. Because I'm approaching 10 years of doing it, and it is mind blowing. The time goes so fast. And when you just stay true to yourself, the universe will rise up to meet you, and everything will work to plan the way it's meant to. It may not be exactly how we think in our mind. Our ego may say, oh, we should be here. This should be happening. No, it's exactly where it's meant to be right at the moment. And to just be at peace with that and flow with it. And you'll look up a year from now and just be amazed at, as we always underestimate what we can do in a year or 5 years, and we over exaggerate what we can do in a day or a week or a month. But having those goals, having things we're striving toward, like I said, having them is great. Slow motion is better than no motion, and giving yourself permission to not go all out is okay too. You know, it's
100%. Because that one of the things that I saw immediately for me is, while financially for the time being, obviously, like over the years, I'll build up to where I was, maybe not years, whatever the universe wants to make happen, right? There is a vast amount of emotional and mental and physical richness that you get that I didn't have before. So while on the corporate side, I had financial richness to an extent, I wouldn't say I was very much lacking in the emotional, physical, and mental richness. And now that I'm on the other side of it, I see how numb I was to being present in areas of my life that matter the most. And on Mother's Day, I had, at the end of it, I just had tears streaming down my cheeks, because I was so overcome with happiness and the gratitude of what I had. But then I was also overcome with, God, I had this all along. And I never really felt it tenfold like I do right now, because I was at capacity with other stress factors in my life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I hear you on all of those levels. Not until we can step out of the demilitarized zone that we can realize, oh, wow, I had all of these things all along. But when you're just fight or flight, just detracts from everything completely.
Yes. And I fully believe that you can have it all. You can have a successful career. You can have a successful, abundant personal life, but you just have to make sure that you're maintaining a balance and respecting those boundaries. I remember there was an executive that before I left my corporate, there was an executive client of ours doing a fireside chat, and she was like, "You can have it all, just not at the same time." And I was like, "Why not? Why can't you? Maybe you're." And I mean, if I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that, because I don't know. I feel like we have our choice in what that looks like. And
yeah, I think it's what you had said earlier is that when most of us, the majority of us, are operating with self-limiting beliefs, with wounds from the past, and we go into whether it's work environments, relationships, whatever those things are, and we conduct ourselves in a way that worked in that other experience we had of life. And those tapes are causing us to, see, in my case, like I climb that ladder, get that job, move. Who cares if you're moving across country twice? Exactly. So it's all about choices, but it's why we're making those choices, because I believe the wounds by overcompensating in other areas.
yes.
And that ultimately does lead to burnout. And I didn't have anything to jump out to. When I left, I was like, I'm just done. I just can't do this anymore. And I literally took 8 months to find myself. I had retirement money. I had like an executive savings plan. I remember being so fearful because I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to, and then it was that same thought that I had. I actually had a friend who said, well, you can always go back. And I said, don't even give me that option, because I don't want that to be an option. It ultimately wasn't. And I just kept going. I have done so many different things. I've had multiple websites, multiple business endeavors, and multiple startups. And you just stay true to yourself. And I'm probably in the most alignment right now that I've ever been, which is just so soothing to my soul. And it's created a life that I love and that I'm peaceful at, which is why I'm wanting to help other people realize there are other options. You have to just give yourself permission. So this is one of the final things I'll ask you is, what advice would you have for someone who they're listening to this, they're burned out, they know that they need to be doing something different, or they maybe know someone else that needs to hear this? What advice would you give someone who is needing to make a change? What are the first steps that you would suggest that they do to get more in alignment with themselves?
I mean, honestly, just believe that anything that you want can happen. I truly, truly believe that. And that if you have a pull, if you have a desire that you feel deep in your heart space, there is a big difference between your head and your ego and your mind and what that's telling you versus what your soul and your heart is telling you. I truly believe that the more you lean into your heart's calling, the more aligned your life will be. Usually, I will say this from my own experience, the heart's calling doesn't always make the most sense on paper, ever. But once you continue to listen to it and you take steps towards it, what you will see, kind of what you said, is like the universe starts to pull things into your path because you are stepping into alignment on the life you want to be living. And that's where all of a sudden things just start to make sense. I did it when my husband and I left. We lived in California. We moved to Chicago to be closer to family. And then we wanted to come back to California. Financially, it made no sense. Absolutely no sense on paper, but we did it. And we are extremely happy, and it all worked out. And the same thing with my leap. On paper makes no sense, but it just makes all the sense in the world at the heart level. You will not live a life with regrets the more you lean into the heart. And it's possible. Everything is possible.
I love that. Love that so much. So Moonrock Wellness, how can people get in touch with you? I will put the links in the show notes below, but where can they go?
Yes, thank you. The website is moonrockwellness.com. And my Instagram handle is moon_rock_wellness. And you can DM me, you can email me, jessica@moonrockwellness.com. I would love to hear from you. Right now, I have my Connect Back to You coaching program open. So there's spots available. And then I also have a wellness membership. So for busy women professionals, if you want to have daily wellness, there's yoga, meditation, breathwork, sound healing, all for a super low rate. So just reach out. I love connecting with people.
So good. Just so good. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. It's inspiring and encouraging. And just like you said, we don't have to know. I always say God gives us enough sunlight for the day and then takes it away so that we rest and come back the next day and things are new and refreshed and we start over again. And so give ourselves permission to not have all the answers, but to follow our heart, stay connected with your heart, and you'll never be steered wrong.
Yes, 100%. I love that.
I'll have to have you on again down the road. Then we'll do an update on what's happened and where you're at and all of that. So thank you so much.
Oh, I would love that. Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you so, so much.
Okay.
Bye.
And that's a wrap on another episode of And Then I Did This, celebrating the lives of those who've walked away from the beaten path to pursue work and a life that nourishes their soul. If you're feeling inspired and ready to explore your own path to freedom, check out youcanbefree.life, where you'll find resources and support to help you break free and live life on your own terms. See you next time.